I don't think this cabin was built for people. I thought the mountain was hollow. Not in the geological sense. No sinkholes, no caverns plotted on topo maps. I mean, it felt wrong underfoot, like walking on the skin of something holding its breath. I told myself that 3 times on the drive up, a joke that didn't land. I'd rented a cabin that promised total seclusion, no neighbors for miles. The kind of place where quiet is the main feature. The photos showed wood siding the color of toast, a chimney thick enough for a century of winters, a deck buried in snow. The owner's directions were simple: follow a county road, pass a closed campground, take a service track behind a rusted cattle gate. Key is in the lockbox, their message said. Wood in the shed. If you need me, ranger office downtown usually knows how to reach me. No one knew I was going. I wanted silence, phones off, inbox forgotten. No city noise pretending to be life, just nothing. The last bar of reception vanished around noon. The pines leaned closer the higher I climbed. Past the campground, past picnic tables that looked fossilized, the world thinned until even the wind seemed hesitant. By the time I rolled through the cattle gate, the quiet pressed so hard my ears popped. The trees bled black resin, not amber beads, tar-dark veins that slicked down bark into the snow. Where it touched, the snow dented, like something had pushed up from beneath to meet it halfway. The cabin sat in an oval clearing, more absence than space. The deck leaned, the chimney sagged, the door was too new. When I stepped inside, dust rose like breath on a mirror. It was fine. Cold, but fine. Wood stove in the corner, a bed frame that looked built by a 12-year-old, shrink-wrap film on the windows bubbling at the seams. The thermometer on the wall read 38 degrees. I fed the stove from the stacked firewood, the first log caught, filling the air with the smell every cabin candle is trying to earn. The quiet didn't soften. If anything, it pressed harder, like a rule posted without words. I tried to sleep on the couch that first night, fire burning high. Around midnight, the stove hiccuped. Smoke pressed down into the room before the draft corrected. I thought that was the worst of it until I heard the scrape. Not skittering, not mice. A slow drag beneath the floorboards, stone on stone. The wood shifted a fraction like something was testing the weight above. I pressed my hand to the floor, felt it, steady, deliberate, then gone. I didn't sleep. By morning, I told myself it was frost heave or ice shifting in the soil, something natural, something boring. But that night, the scraping came again, multiplied, drifting beneath the stove, under the bathroom, under my bed. The boards rose and fell in rhythm, not human, not animal, too even, like the floor itself was inhaling. I whispered, no, just to hear something human. I didn't leave, not yet. The next morning, I stepped onto the deck with coffee. That's when the tree line moved. Something slid between the pines, taller than the trees themselves. For a moment, it looked like a pillar of bark. Then it leaned and cracks split open to reveal pale matter shifting beneath armor-like plates. Its head sagged forward, eyeless, mouthless, until cartilage ground open in a ring, wet and deliberate. The sound wasn't animal. It was structural, like a building deciding to fail. I bolted back inside and shut the curtains, as if that would matter. The truck wouldn't start. The dash lit up fine. The starter groaned, but the engine stayed silent. When I looked back toward the tree line, there were more of them. A row. Not walking, growing. Plates locking into place as they rose taller, mouths opening soundlessly until the air vibrated hard enough to rattle my teeth. By morning, they were gone, but the floor wasn't. When I woke the next day, the boards around my bed were damp. Black veins ran across the floor, pulsing faintly, leading back to the stove. The iron sagged a quarter-inch toward the ground, as if something below was pulling it down. I called the ranger station. Left a voicemail that sounded sane, words like possible frost heave and safety issue. No one called me back. By afternoon, the silence had a pulse. Snow fell straight down, no wind, piling uniformly on the deck as if placed there. That night, the stove failed again, coughing smoke into the room. I opened the door for air, then froze. One of them stood at the clearing's edge, closer than any had dared, plates shifting, height adjusting, watching without eyes. I slammed the door, deadbolted it, dragged the dresser against the bedroom door even though I didn't plan on using it, sat in the dark with the axe across my lap and the pry bar from the shed in my hand. At midnight, the floor inhaled. Every board lifted under me. The stovepipe bent as if tugged. The temperature dropped 6 degrees in a minute. I yanked up a floorboard. Beneath it wasn't dirt, but fine black grounds threaded with pulsing veins. When I cut one with the axe, it stitched itself back together instantly. The ground beneath the foundation pulsed, pushing into the cabin's frame like a lung exhaling against my ribs. I did the only thing I could think of. Fire. I tore shrink wrap off the windows, built a second blaze in the old hearth scar under the rug, fed it books, papers, anything that would burn. Flames licked high, but the smoke flattened under the ceiling like a lid was pressed down. From beneath, a sound tried to form into a word. Not speech, just the shape of it. 30 mouths guessing at vowels at once. That was enough. I grabbed my pack, scarf, axe, headlamp, crawled under the floor again, jammed the pry bar across the seam near the stove. The foundation clenched, the metal bent, and I dumped the stove's ash bucket into the crack. Embers glowed and died like something below had breathed them out. I didn't wait for proof. I ran. The clearing was smaller. Trees leaned inward. The ground caught at my boots, granular like walking on beans. The tall shape waited at the edge, height adjusting, pale matter flexing inside plates. I aimed for the only gap that looked like a corridor and sprinted. Behind me, the cabin exhaled. The sound stripped the heat off my back. I don't remember crossing the gate. Just the pin between my teeth, the chain giving, and the road widening until the world finally sounded alive again. Birds, water, a snowplow dragging its blade. At the first gas station, I left another voicemail. The ground at that cabin isn't right. The floor breathes, something in the trees. Please. I stopped before I said eats people, said hurts people instead. No one called back. That was weeks ago. I thought I was safe. But last night, in my apartment, 3 floors up, the quiet shifted. My ears popped. I pressed my hand to the floor and told myself I was cured by data. Then I heard it. A faint drag, rearranging something granular. Not loud, not close. Just the sound of 1,000 hands under a floor, moving, remembering. And I don't think it wants me back on the mountain. I think the mountain is coming here. Last night I drove to the emergency department. There was something there that wasn't human. I'm just waiting for a room, my wife said. We sat in the lobby beside the security desk. Only a few patients were left. Thank God, I thought. Maybe they'll take us soon. When we'd come to the ER that morning, the nurse had said, if she doesn't pee within 8 hours, come back and we'll put in a new catheter. Well, it had been 9 hours since my wife last urinated. We needed help. I'm going to burst, my wife groaned, clutching her belly. They'll see us soon, I lied, squeezing her wrist. At our feet, a frightened little hiccup escaped. It was Macy, our newborn. She was writhing in the car seat. Next to us, a bald, sickly-looking woman sighed. There was a bloody spot on the bandage at her crown, and she was skin and bones. Probably cancer, I thought. I smiled at her politely, and then I noticed a strange man had settled beside her, tall, pale, wearing faded clothes. From my angle, it was hard to make out, but it seemed that his face... Honey, my wife touched my shoulder. Can you ask when a room will be free? Yeah. I got up and started looking for a nurse, but everyone was busy or disappeared into some room. We're doing everything we can, an orderly tossed over his shoulder. I went back to my wife. Just a few more minutes. Another lie. Sinking into the chair, I looked again at the bald woman. The man who had been sitting next to her was gone. 40 minutes later, an orderly burst into the lobby pushing a wheelchair. A room opened up. Seat her. By then, my wife was already having spasms. Saliva streamed from her lips. I helped the orderly move her into the chair, grabbed Macy, and we rushed through the swinging double doors and found an empty room. Transfer her to the bed, the nurse ordered as she ran in with a bladder scanner. I watched them lift my wife onto the gurney. I was scared, but grateful they were finally going to examine her. As I watched, a bubbling sound began behind me. I turned. Something pale and sickly flashed at the doorway. I stepped into the corridor and looked down it. There was no one there. When my wife had stabilized, I handed Macy to her to breastfeed. Then I dashed off to the restroom. On the way to the loo, a viscous, desperate sob struck my ears. Please help me. The sound came from the room ahead. God, it hurts. The voice was so desperate, so pleading. I'm not a doctor, but I could at least warn the nurses if needed. I ran to the swinging door and saw a frail woman, maybe 70, lying in the bed. Her shirt was pulled up, exposing her belly. And there was someone in the bed with her. It was the same pale man from the lobby. But now he had no clothes on. His skin, so thin and unhealthy, seemed barely stretched over bone. His hands rested on her stomach, as if he were searching for something there. I was horrified and couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. My voice shook when I said, "Excuse me." The pale man lifted his head. On his face were two coal-black eyes, an underdeveloped bony nose like a skull's, and a strange, wet smile. I spun on my heel and ran. When I came back, my wife had visibly relaxed. The new catheter was working. Macy slept, curled against her mother. My God, Todd, you look like you saw a ghost. Really? I'm just tired, I went to my wife, but it overwhelmed me so much that I slid down the side of the bed and began to sob. It'll be okay, she said, stroking the back of my head. I prayed while the nurse was helping me. Really? Yes. I felt like some dark thing was trailing after me. But after they put in the new catheter, something changed. Does that sound strange? No, not at all. The sound of footsteps at the door made me look up. The pale man was watching us. His worm-like lips twisted into a troubling grimace. What the hell is that? My wife asked. I don't know. The gloomy figure sighed wearily, dropped its shoulders and dissolved into the corridor. My neighbor's dog is named Satan. There's something wrong about him. Hey, don't let Satan out, she yelled as I opened my apartment door, arms full of groceries. That's when I saw him there in the hallway. A skinny mutt with that sad shelter dog look in his eyes. He walked slowly, curious. Then the neighbor, this woman in her 70s who walked with a limp, came rushing over and gently scolded him for sneaking out. Your dog's name is Satan? I asked, without even thinking if it sounded rude. She laughed and said, yeah. Said she knew it made people raise their eyebrows, but that was the name on his tag. The building's superintendent had found him about a week earlier wandering around the street. He tried to track down the original owner since there was a caller, but no luck. So he asked if she wanted to take him in. After telling me the whole story, she tugged his leash and led him back inside. But the dog kept looking at me, wouldn't stop staring. Over the next few days, I saw Satan here and there. When she walked him or when she accidentally left her door open and he wandered the hallway again. Every time I ran into him, he came right up to me like he wanted something. His eyes were wide and sad, too sad. Something about them felt off. One morning, I left early for the gym before work. As I stepped out of my apartment, I heard a sound, like a scream, but weird. It was low and drawn out, like someone running out of breath. It was coming from the neighbor's place. I knocked on her door and asked if everything was okay. No answer. The sound kept going. I tried the handle and it burned my hand. That's when I saw smoke coming from the cracks. The noise woke up the rest of the floor and a few of us busted the door open. We found her in the living room, sitting in her chair, on fire, but not like a house fire. The flames weren't spreading. They were only on her, burning her skin away while she just sat there, silent now. The smell hit me hard. I still gag when I think about it. Satan wasn't anywhere in the apartment. No one could explain how the fire started. The cops said something about her phone and the chair being super flammable, but no one really bought it. I kept wondering where the dog had gone, even though I figured that was the end of it. But 2 days later, coming home from work, I heard the sound of paws heading my way. I turned around and there was Satan, standing right next to me with the same eyes as before. Right behind him, holding his leash, was this middle-aged accountant I kind of knew by sight. He lived alone on the second floor and was a short guy who was always squinting like his glasses weren't doing their job. Bit of an oddball. I asked how he found the dog, and he said the super had found him a couple days ago, curled up by a trash can outside, scared and starving. "And do you still call him Satan?" I asked, eyeing the tag still hanging from his collar. "Of course. That's his name," he said with a shrug. That bugged me. Not gonna lie, just change the damn name. I didn't dwell on it too much and got on with my life. Until a few days later, at lunch, some co-workers started talking about a horrible accident that happened the day before. Some guy's car exploded the moment he turned the keys on. Fire engulfed the whole thing for nearly half an hour, even with firefighters on the scene. One of them showed me a video someone had taken on their phone while walking past it, and you can't imagine the shock I felt when I realized it was the accountant in that car. Flames wrapped the car completely, and inside the man let out a low, endless scream just like the neighbor. I spent the whole day trying to make sense of what happened and what the dog had to do with it, but nothing fit. That night, when I went down to take out the trash, I was stunned to see a teenage girl holding Satan on a leash with her father behind her. "We named him Duke. The super gave him to us today," said the owner abandoned him. The father explained. "It's always been her dream to have a dog. She looked so happy, and at least they'd changed the name. But after what I'd seen, I couldn't leave that dog in their hands. I pretended to be his real owner, said I demanded they give it to me, and even threatened to call the cops. The girl started crying, and I hated doing it, but it was for her own good. I left with the dog and brought him into my apartment. I'll be honest, I was scared as hell I'd end up like the others. But the second he walked in, he just sat in a corner, staring at me with those same sad eyes. At first, I was afraid. Then I started feeling sorry for him. Then I had an idea. Maybe the super knew more about the dog since he was the one who found him. I left Satan alone and went to knock on the super's door. Knocked 3 times and nothing. Then I heard it. That same weird scream, low and constant, I'd heard at my neighbor's place. And again in that video. I grabbed the doorknob and opened it, surprised it wasn't locked. But the apartment was empty. and the noise stopped. There wasn't even any furniture in the place, just a desk by the window with a couple of pens and this big old book open on it. Something about it pulled me in, and I walked over to look at the page. It was just names, one after another. The last two I recognized as the old woman and the accountant. I was about to flip the page when I heard a noise behind me and nearly jumped out of my skin. The super was standing at the door, staring me down. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked. I tried to explain, said I heard something and got worried. Said I came because of the dog. "As far as I know, he's your problem now," he said, and his tone made it clear the father called him in a not-so-nice way. "So, get out of my apartment." I nodded and started walking out. But right as I got into the hallway, he called out again, laughing. "Everyone thinks it's the dog's name," he said, between chuckles. "What?" I asked, confused. "The tag on the collar." "That's not the dog's name," he continued. "It's the owner's." Then he slammed the door in my face. That was yesterday, and I barely slept last night. I stayed up for hours digging through forums, random videos, anything I could find online that might explain what this dog is or what I'm supposed to do with him. But the thing that's really messing with my head is how he keeps staring at me, all the time. And I'm starting to notice weird stuff now, like the way he limps just like the old lady did, or the way he sometimes wrinkles his nose like he's squinting to see better, just like the accountant. Maybe I'm losing it from the lack of sleep. But I swear to God, when I look into his eyes, I see someone begging for help. It's the same look I saw in the neighbor's burning eyes when I burst through her door.